Many individuals argue that a dog is man's best friend, but few acknowledge the loyalty and devotion of a parrot as an equally valuable companion. It was my parrot, Sherlock, who opened my eyes and changed my perspective. So how did it all begin? "Mom, I want a parrot," I shared with my mother. "Son, who will clean the cage? Who will take care of it?" She tried to dissuade me. "I will clean the cage and take care of its food," I persisted. "Do we really need this hassle?" my father complained. Since my childhood, I had adored cartoons featuring Kesha, the parrot. It could be said that I grew up watching them. I constantly pestered my parents for a tropical bird, but they always redirected my requests and gave me toys instead. As a teenager, my dream remained unchanged, solidifying even more. I desired a parrot so intensely that I dedicated all my pocket money to saving for it, even forgoing completing school. I also lost count of how many books about these birds I read during that time. Finally, my parents gave in. We broke open the piggy bank and purchased a beautiful gray parrot with a red tail. I named him Sherlock, as I had a fondness for detective stories. My Sherlock was an incredibly intelligent bird, quickly picking up everything. Consequently, it took considerable effort to teach him to refrain from using inappropriate phrases. I bought him from a bird market. After finishing university, I found a job and moved out of my parents' house, with Sherlock accompanying me, of course. In the neighborhood, there was a delightful little store where I acquired bird food and various toys. In that store, a girl named Katerina worked. She was kind and charming. "I've come to see you again," I teased the girl, causing her to blush slightly. "The usual for you? How's Sherlock?" She sweetly smiled back. She was always curious about both me and the parrot. I enjoyed sharing my life with her. Eventually, I mustered the courage to invite her for a walk. Before I knew it, we were deeply involved in a passionate relationship that progressed rapidly. Katya was already at my house. "I'm not a psychopath," Sherlock declared. "What's wrong?" Katerina trembled as we stepped into the hallway. "I'm an exceptionally active sociopath," Sherlock added. "That's the Sherlock I told you about," I smiled. "Well, he wasn't that creepy in the stories." The girl nervously waved. "Sherlock, what are you doing?" I shouted at him. "Elementary, Watson." "Sitting in a cage," Sherlock replied. Initially, Katya was fearful of Sherlock, refusing to go near the cage. However, with time, she grew accustomed to it all and eventually fell in love with my pet. She taught him phrases and even allowed him to perch on her shoulder. When I started coming home late from work and had limited contact with Sherlock, the girl was a big help. "Seema, look at Sherlock." She nodded towards the parrot. "The talking bird is admired for its intelligence and cleverness," Sherlock said. I sighed skeptically. Lately, Katerina had been teaching the bird some odd phrases, despite my repeated requests to use words from detective books and TV series. After all, his name is Sherlock, but I couldn't do much about it since I was busy working late into the night, saving up for a gold wedding ring. Finally, I saved enough money, bought the diamond ring she wanted, and arranged a romantic dinner. "Katya, will you marry me?" I kneeled down and presented her with the box. "Yes, yes, of course," she responded. "Wise advice and love," Sherlock shouted. Things went on as usual, or so it seemed to me. I was getting back into the work routine, now focused on saving for our dream wedding, as Katya called it. When I returned home again, late in the evening, I checked on Sherlock. The bride was in the bathroom. "Sherlock, how are you?" I gently stroked the bird's head. "Grisha," Sherlock suddenly shouted. "Who is Grisha?" I stared at the bird in surprise. "Sherlock, what is it?" I asked again. The bride had already emerged from the bathroom. I was watching a TV series, and the main character's name was Grisha. "That's what Sherlock remembered," she explained. "Well, now it's your job to correct him," I told her. The next day, I noticed that Katya had moved Sherlock's cage to the kitchen, away from our room. When I asked about it, she simply brushed it off, claiming she had moved the cage to clean it and had forgotten to return it. It raised some concerns, but I didn't pay much attention until I discovered that the door to Sherlock's room was locked. There was even a cloth stuffed under the small opening between the door and the floor. Katya, what is this? I pulled out the cloth. Sherlock has been squawking all day, and it's wearing me out, the girl sighed. I've told you many times, his room should be left open. Covering the cage is enough, I scolded her. One evening, when I arrived home, the bride was nowhere to be found. I may still be at work or at the store, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I went to wash my hands and put on the kettle. As I entered, I greeted Sherlock, since being alone can be quite lonely for a bird at home. I gently caressed the parrot with my finger and asked, "How are you, my friend? Do you miss me?" To my surprise, Sherlock exclaimed, come on, hurry up." I widened my eyes in confusion and asked, "What is it, Sherlock?" However, there was no response. I wondered where Sherlock picked up those phrases from, as I remained perplexed. Sherlock continued to say Grisha repeatedly, curious about who taught him these words. I lightly shook the cage to make Sherlock stop. Sherlock then spoke again, saying, "Katya, Katenka, just one more minute, Katusha." I anxiously awaited Katya's return, consumed by a multitude of unanswered questions. She was the only one who could have influenced Sherlock in this way. This realization suggested that my fiancé might be cheating on me, and this Grisha person kept resurfacing. There must have been a reason why my fiancé kept Sherlock locked up or took away his cage. Finally, I heard the sound of jingling keys, and Katya entered the room. I asked her tensely, "Katya, where have you been?" In response, she calmly said, "At a friend's." Why? I told her about Sherlock's unusual behavior and the phrases he had been saying. Surprisingly, she had no idea where Sherlock had learned those words from either. Initially, Katya claimed to have spent the whole day at work and then at a friend's house. However, she eventually remembered watching the same show where Grigory was the main character. With a grin, I remarked, "Isn't that quite a coincidence?" And the main character's name is Katerina. In frustration, Katya exclaimed, "No, damn Parrot," as she pounded her fist on the table. She confessed that while I was working hard and saving money for our dream wedding, she had been secretly seeing her ex, Grishka. Not only that, but Grishka had also been teaching Sherlock those phrases. Apparently, Grishka dropped by Katya's workplace, and they started talking. He invited her to his house, where he showed her a kitten he had rescued from the streets, leading to the rekindling of old feelings. Before the wedding plans could proceed any further, everything came crashing down. Katya packed up all her belongings that night and left, with Sherlock bidding them goodbye and encouraging me not to promise anything. My loyal parrot, Sherlock, ended up being a spy for the enemy, revealing the truth about my soon-to-be bride. It's quite amusing how one can spend time with their ex while their current partner is toiling away at work. This experience served as a valuable lesson for Katya. Secrets are bound to be exposed, and I grew to love my feathered friend even more. As a token of my gratitude, I bought Sherlock a new, beautiful, and more spacious cage.